In this episode of the Business Growth Podcast, we speak with Naveen Dittakavi about how to build recurring revenue in your business. He also shares examples of what he does to avoid customer turnover. Welcome to the podcast, Naveen.
Thank you for having me, Spencer.
Thanks. So, Naveen, in our preparation for this interview, we spent a lot of time at formulating the message that we're going to help our listeners understand. And I want to get into starting off with how you think and why you put so much time into preparation, and then we'll get into the specifics of the business that you're running.
Sure. So one of the things that I learned from one of my mentors, who's Ramit Sethi, is that preparation is key, that 80% of the work is done before you ever enter a room. And this is covered in a lot of his courses, and one of the techniques is called the briefcase technique, basically saying that before you go meet with a prospective client, before you go meet with your boss to negotiate a salary raise, what are you going to prepare, and how much work are you going to have shown that you've done in order to seal the deal if it's a client, or to be persuasive and convince your boss to greenlight your raise. So I translated that advice into all kinds of preparation. So last December, 2 Decembers ago, December 2012, I had an opportunity to meet Ramit in person, and I'd only been conversing with him through email, just like any other reader of his. And when I had that opportunity to meet him in person, I booked the next flight out at full price, and I had brunch with him in Los Angeles. And this was with 1 week's notice. So I basically took that entire week off of work, and I prepared for 30 to 40 hours the types of questions that I wanted to get answered, because I was about to meet someone who has taken his business from one level to the next, and I was sick and tired of keeping my business where it was at. I also wanted to make that disproportionate leap to the next level, and I knew that I needed to speak with someone who had done that before to understand exactly what I needed to do as well.
So you and I both study a lot of Ramit's material, and Ramit sets himself different because he actually focuses on habits instead of little tactical things or things that aren't long lasting. And you took the time to prepare for that interview. What were the key habits Ramit mentioned that you should develop to grow your business to that next level?
So it was really interesting. I would say that it wasn't necessarily a habit that needed to be developed in me. Well, there was one, but the first thing that I had to recognize is that I was holding myself back artificially, meaning that I was not willing to take that leap and that chance on my own, and that I had made this journey to Los Angeles to basically seek permission from my sensei to make that leap. I mean, he just looked me straight in the eye. I was sitting next to him, and he said, "Naveen, you have to make a choice to make recurring revenue happen." And I asked him, like, how do I make recurring revenue a bigger part of my business then? And I was like, okay, I choose to do that. And it was really obvious that I had to choose to do that. But there are habits that led me to actually build significant recurring revenue in a 7-month period, which allowed me to hit, basically attain financial freedom, where my revenue exceeded my expenses on a day-to-day basis. Those habits were along the lines of prioritization. What Ramit allowed me to develop through his advice and through one of his courses is the ability to prioritize getting three very specific things done each week that work towards whichever goal that you're trying to set out. So by systematizing prioritization through one of the programs, I was able to set aside time diligently, week after week, for 7 months to grow my recurring revenue in my business, and to work on strategy on how to build that recurring revenue. And then in July, I think on July 8th, I announced to everybody in Ramit's Brain Trust that I had looked at my FreshBooks invoicing, and the recurring invoices that were going out exceeded my monthly cost of living post-taxes. So I was just like, wow. I mean, it was just a slow, prioritized march to making that happen.
So you've been a top performer the whole time. So it's not like Ramit took you from being a B player to an A player. But you had to make that transition of saying, I give myself permission, or I'm going to focus on growing the recurring revenue. As you did that, I mean, you already had this successful business. Let's talk a little bit about the freedom, because you mentioned how the recurring revenue has provided you, we'll call margin or freedom, to act differently on your business and to approach it differently. How has that changed?
It's really interesting. So it happened, and my recurring revenue eclipsed my expenses. And first, I was like, "Wow!" I kind of took it all in. That goal when I started my business 10, 12 years ago had finally been achieved. But the thing is like when you've been doing something for so long, it that overnight that win or whatever that is not an overnight win, and your habits and your practices continue. I think this is why we hear a lot of like lottery winners lose all of their money, because they suddenly get this windfall, but their spending habits and their investing habits have not changed at all. So for me, even though I had enormous recurring revenue now coming in then rather, I still continue to take on and seek client work, and I was still taking the same kinds of clients that I was before, projects around the $25,000 price point. And that kind of just continued for months and months and months after July. And I still continued to do, it was business as usual, even though recurring revenue was coming in. But then a few months later, it clicked in that I have the power to say no, because I have this recurring revenue base that I don't have to worry about meeting expenses anymore. So once I fully internalized what had happened for me, at that point, I was able to start saying no to the wrong types of clients and take on only the right types of clients where I can help tremendously.
Do you think saying no is one of the reasons for sabotage on people plateauing in their business or not going to that next level?
Not saying no, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the ability to not say no.
Yeah, I think so. It's just that, especially if you're in some kind of consulting world, you're very hungry, and it's very feast and famine, and you can't say no to engagements because you don't know when the next one is coming. And after the crash in 2008, 2009, I mean, I think that really rewired a lot of us. Whereas a lot of us, including myself, were sitting pretty fat and happy before the recession, and then during the recession, business dried up almost completely, and we had to rework our businesses to get them back to where it was. So that's at that point you build a habit of not saying no to anything. I mean, you want to do a $500 project, let's do it. You want to do a $20,000 project, awesome. If you want to do anything, let's do it. I'm not going to say no because I may not know where this leads. I may not know if this is a $500 like project that we do now, maybe that translates into a $10,000 project later, and you took everything that you could get in order to stay alive, and that unfortunately does hold you back, because if you don't stop doing that, then you will never make time for yourself, make time for strategy. You'd always be in tactical hell.
Okay, I've seen that happen many times in businesses, and I'm going to admit myself guilty as well. And before our call, we were talking, and we said that, when a person, either they have a consulting business offering a service, and they're making to look that leap into software, there's sometimes what we call like an invisible script of saying, it has to be automated, or I have to be able to scale this before I start. Let's start talking about some of those things, because that's how you create the automation. And you were actually giving me some insight that made me say, okay, wait, this is something we need to share with the audience.
Okay, that sounds good. This is really interesting because it came to me over time and experience as well. Is that you have to ask yourself: are you a software guy? Are you an engineer? Are you a developer? Are you a technician? Or are you a business consultant, or are you a business owner. But the issue that we face is that when we identify ourselves as developers and when we start looking at problems as developers or engineers or consultants, then we're kind of looking at it from like, what happens if this takes off? If this idea that I have, if it succeeds, what happens? How am I going to handle customer support? How am I going to handle scale? Do I go on Heroku or Amazon, or what do I need to do in order to handle the load? And this is like, stuff that may or may not happen to you. Like, this is still an idea in your head. So one of the things that I learned through Earn 1K and another course is to validate the ideas very quickly. And this is what we always hear from Eric Ries: validate, customer develop. And the thing is that we listen to what they say, but very few of us actually do it to a very basic level. We tend to do it, and we try to jump the ball too quickly, and we try to go for advanced automation, advanced scaling. Our example that we talked about earlier was a service that you were thinking about doing, where somebody sends you something, and then you go, and then you're working with another fulfillment service to get that thing done, and then hand it back to your client as a fulfilled service request. Now, you were talking about your fears about, scaling it and like the automation, and you're going to have to set aside time for software development to handle the automation. We're talking about, Zapier and all this other stuff. But I was just like, well, dude, why don't we just, put up a form and, work on your marketing and sales collateral, taken the deliverable, the file that the client wants you to process, let that just, an email or a Google form or wherever it's stored, doesn't Wufoo form, and take that file, hand it to your fulfillment agency, let them do their magic, do their work, and then they give it back to you, and then you email it back to them. And that's basically the validation right there. And why don't we just test it and make sure that somebody really wants this service before we start investing time and money into a larger, elaborate, scalable system, which may or may not be necessary. The example that we also talked about was, if this grows to the point where you're getting 10, 20, 100 orders per day, do you turn the system off until you can handle it? I say no. I said, why don't you hire some, US-based VAs like TaskRabbits and give them a checklist of how to actually handle the fulfillment. And then they just, they update a Google Doc with stuff, and then, they just email the clients for you, and fulfillment is automated that way. Like, software doesn't necessarily have to solve our problems. It can when it makes sense to do it, but a lot of our problems are process oriented. And if we can solve a process manually, let's solve it manually and then automate it later.
Now, why do you think that's the key to the process of actually getting it out there? We've talked with the importance of validating the idea, and Pam Slim, a person that we both mutually respect, she says the real validation is someone giving you money. So yeah. The idea of saying how much would you pay or would you do this, that kind of goes out the window, and the quickest to payment is putting it up and doing it manually. Why do you think software developers or entrepreneurs get in this echo chamber of wanting to automate?
Because that's what we know. This is the biggest problem that I faced as well before 2012, I'd say, is that I was always identified myself as an entrepreneur or consultant or developer, and I kept myself inside this echo chamber of being that kind of person. But ultimately, where my skills were lacking and what I was not certain about, what I had a lot of insecurities about, was sales and marketing. I could sell a service to anybody, a web app, which is what I do on a day-to-day basis, to any kind of client that's the right fit. I could very easily sell that. But when we're talking about a service that is, turnkey, that's on the web, like something like what we were just talking about, I wouldn't have known where to start in 2011 or earlier. But in 2012, I made an investment of starting to look at sales and marketing resources, to start learning what the right people have been doing all along, meaning that the people who have been selling these solutions all along, how did they get there? What did they read? What did they study? And one person has been very transparent, and that was Ramit. And you can go to his Delicious page on marketing, which is delicious.com/Ramit Sethi, and then choose a marketing filter. And I just went tactically through every single article that he had bookmarked in Delicious and started to just take notes. I have a lot of notes. Took notes on every single blog post that he had tagged that he thought was relevant. And I started to understand where my skills were lacking and what I needed to study. And then I took it to the next level. I started buying the books that he had talked about in his Mixergy interviews with Andrew Warner, and which was tested advertising methods and breakthrough advertising and other copywriting and persuasion books. And I started to really get myself in the mind of a master marketer and understanding what goes on in selling a product or selling a service. How do you really get inside the person's head? How do you convince them that what you're doing is valuable? And that's what I had to do. I took a lot of deliberate practice, but not so much that you had to go get an MBA or something. Like, it just took just diligent study.
So, Naveen, I'm going to say this and it sounds weird, you're not a normal guy to go through and to read all of Ramit's Delicious posts and to take mountains of notes and to go through this information. So you systematically went through to make yourself a better marketer, a better persuasion expert. Mm-hmm. Can we get into the things that you used persuasion-wise to help grow your monthly recurring revenue?
I don't think that I would say that like the marketing itself directly cause recurring revenue, like the study of it. I think that the study of marketing, study of persuasion allowed for me to understand the types of clients that are best served by what I can do for people with software. And I think that's really where it starts. So when I was reading through, say, influence, or when I was reading through, say, tested advertising methods, the examples in those books show you how people think and how people are motivated to make purchasing decisions or make decisions to help others in the case of influence. And when I got to the core of it, when I started to think about the kinds of clients that I'm helping, I was then realizing that the kinds of clients that I was going after at that time, I was doing more transactional-oriented work. So when I realized that my business was, while it was deeply relationship-based, I was doing transactional work. That's when the big shift was. And I moved away from transactional work to very long-term strategy work, different kinds of implementations and services that were recurring in nature so that I could provide continuous value to my client rather than building them an app and providing them with incremental transactional value.
Okay, so that's a pretty big mind shift to go through of looking at it that way. Let's talk a little bit about the business itself, and you've focused a lot on processes. Can you talk about some of those processes and work that you've done?
So I would say that here's something that I learned, through some other material, and that was that what we want to do is we don't want to model people where they are now. We want to model people and understand what they did to get there. So if I were to talk about what is working for me now, that would not be relevant to a lot of people who are not here right now or not one step below. What I think people have to master is the stuff a little earlier on. So I think I want to talk about the transformation that happened for me about 2 years ago in becoming a high-value consultant. So one of the things that I did is I read this book, by Ramit's mentor, Jay Abraham, and he is a world-class marketer. And the book is called Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got. In this book, Jay describes the putting your client at the center of the world, his strategy of preeminence. And what I realized then is that I was too much eye focused prior to reading that book. I was always looking at an engagement as what do I get out of this? Like looking at the revenue, looking at the numbers. And after reading that book, after internalizing that strategy, I started to shift and was like, no, 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 no. I'm helping somebody. Like I stopped looking at it as I'm developing code or I'm developing an app for someone. I'm helping my client. So what can I do for my client to help him or her succeed? And that was the first thing that I learned. The next thing that I learned in the book was how to move up market, meaning that if I was charging roughly $100 an hour then, how are there people out there who are charging hundreds of dollars per hour? What do they do differently? And Jay lays out some techniques talking about, why certain experiences are considered high-end upmarket experiences versus others. So then I started to take a step back and I'm like, all right, here's what I do now for my clients. There's some Basecamp stuff. There's some other things going on, like what every consulting company does. But how can I take it to the next level? How do I make them feel that they're at a Ritz-Carlton or Four Seasons? And how do I then translate that to the experience? So a tactic that I use is called awayfind.com. And what I do is I take my VIP clients or anybody that I want to do business with, and I put it into a Wayfind. Now, what happens is that a Wayfind will send me a text message, will call my phone, and will now do a push notification to let me know that a VIP has emailed in. So what happens is that I then can quickly respond to them and let them know that they have been heard and that their issue will be taken care of. And that allows them to kind of rest easy and feel that like Naveen hears me, Naveen gets me, look how responsive he is. Even though we may not be able to get to that till the next day, they know that their issue has been resolved. You're not going to some kind of support ticket system where you're waiting for a rep. You're not calling and getting voicemail. Your clients feel comfortable emailing you because they know they're going to be heard. So that is one of the things that I did to become a premium service consultant and start setting myself apart. That also actually allowed me to build relationships with certain mentors and VIPs, because when they would send me an idea or a note, I would get that message, quickly send them my thoughts on it, reply back, and they would be like, wow, I sent Naveen a message, and within 10 minutes I got a response that's detailed enough for me to take a next step. So doing something like that starts to let you build relationships and start to move up the value chain. But you still got to be able to do the work and do a really good job of the core service that you're delivering.
So that's something that I've noticed from A players, yourself included. But there's also another element to that, which is being able to fulfill and long term. Let's get into the team aspect. So you've created an environment and people around you that work with you and work for you. Can you talk a little bit about how important the team role is in growing your business?
Yeah, I think that, it depends on the type of organization, but what I've seen people do is they start looking at software companies and certain kind of software consultancies as like a development shop instead of a value-added service provider. So these two guys, friends of friends, wanted to take me out to dinner recently, a few weeks ago, and we went out to dinner here in Atlanta, and they are bootstrapping a company, and they wanted to hear some advice on. They had some screenshots, they had some demo stuff, and they wanted to show me, and they were kind of asking certain questions, and I explained to them that or they asked me like, what would you do? Like, how much would this cost if you did it for us? And I was like, look, guys, like, I'm not a dev shop. Like, this is not what I do. People don't like just ask me that question. It's not a commodity provider. And I said that like our rates are over $200 per hour to work with clients. And they had these eyes like this, like, what the hell? And they're asking like, why do you charge that? Like, how do you, how do you demonstrate that value? And I said, like, because this is what would happen. It's like you come to us with an idea. Maybe you have screenshots. Maybe you even have a demo. That's great. But what we're going to do is we're going to rework this with you over and over again with different audiences to understand who really wants this product. And we're going to help you develop it, of course, but then we're also going to help you market and sell it and all the different strategies that are around pushing the product out there, because a product is going to succeed or fail based on your marketing and selling of the product, not so much on the software development and user experience. Like, that matters to a degree, but it doesn't matter as much as your ability to sell the product out there. And that's how I put a full stack together and started to move up the value chain for the entire stack.
So I see that your ability to sell is at the forefront of the skills that you try and focus on. And
Right.
what is it that separates these people that are barely scraping by versus high producers like you? What sales disciplines do you have that differentiates yourself?
I really do think it's like when you put your client at the center of your universe, and if you remove yourself from being just a developer or a consultant or a dev shop, and you look at the long-term success for your client, if you do that, then you can offer them a full stack of services rather than just being one commodity and a plug of different things that they have to do as an organization.
So this week you provided a perfect example. One of your clients that you've had for a number of years recently decided that they're going to the person operating your SaaS is going to change companies. And so you took the forward pace to it of saying, I'm actually going to contact the new hire and you're going to help them and you're going to cater that product to them. Can you give that story? Because that is exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely. I built this SaaS app years ago. It's 10 years old now. And I sold it to this particular client, or not sold it, I leased it in perpetuity to this particular client 5 years ago. And the client, at the end of the day, is the administrator who's using the app to manage the business. And the administrator decided to move on after 5 years, and actually after 5 years of using our app, and after many more years in that business. And when I heard that he had put in his 2-week notice, I was like, oh my God, the person who uses my product is no longer going to be there. The value must be immediately transposed to the next person, because if it does not, I will have churn. And because they'd be like, why are we paying $2,400 a year for this tool that we don't use because we don't know how to use it? So as soon as I recognized that was going to happen, I thanked my contact, Ken. I said, Ken, thank you so much for giving me the chance to provide you this tool, working with me over these years, and for all the service that you've done for your organization. Then I actually told him about other opportunities, because I have that same product sold at different clients. I told him about other opportunities that I had heard about that might be a good fit for him, because I didn't know why he was leaving, and I wasn't going to assume that if he was leaving because he wanted to leave or they wanted him to leave. So I quickly offered him, and I was like, hey, do you want to talk to other people that I know to do other similar work at other organizations? I'm his friend. I want to help him, even because he's given me a chance. So I did that, and then I sent him those details. And then finally, I asked him, like, who's taking over? Because this is a huge part of your business. Somebody has to take over this role. And he gave me that person. And then I said, thank you, well wishes, and gave him my contact information. I got his. And then I immediately sent an email out to the other person who was coming in, who was 3 weeks new to the organization, to take over. I emailed them saying, hey, I'm Naveen with this. I'd love to sit down with you and give you a personal tour of the product and make sure that you have any questions answered. And I called, I left a voice message, and I heard back from him by email. It's like, hey, yeah, Wednesday at 1 works. So that was yesterday. And so I went down there yesterday afternoon, and I sat down with him. And he's a new guy. He's somewhat technically savvy, but not too technically savvy. I walked him through the app, and I took down what he did at his organization, what he did differently at the prior organization. I told him that, I will make this whatever you need it to be for you. It's meant for your use. And I took down those notes. I made him feel that he can also trust me. And I walked out of that meeting from that client's office with a new person, with a new relationship that I've just deepened. And that churn is probably not going to happen.
That's a good point. Churn in a SaaS business is the devil. That is what kills a business. And what other things do you do to make sure that you don't have churn?
So it's interesting. Like, I did that because my SaaS business isn't at some kind of massive scale where I can start to use all these other services, like I think what is it called, user voice, and all these, and customer.io, and all these different tools that are available for people to create email workflows and stuff like that to avoid churn. It's not at that scale. Like, I have a handful of clients paying thousands of dollars per year for my products, and that works for me. So churn management in my case is about customer and client relationships. So to avoid churn, I just make sure that they're happy. And I reach out to them. I'll say, like, do we need to make any tweaks or changes for you? And that's how I manage churn. And ultimately, that's what all of these different tools that are built for scale do. There are people out there who are working to scale and who are on that scale track, and that's awesome. More power to them. I love to see those people succeed, and those are the big exits that we hear about. But for the rest of us just want to continue to be self-employed because it's awesome. The rest of us want to be able to continue to help people because we take a lot of fulfillment out of it. We don't want to go back to reporting to somebody. We want to report to our clients. We want to help them succeed. And for the 99% of us who are not covered on tech runs and on the biggest, fastest growing startups and all this other stuff, we manage churn by building and maintaining real relationships with our clients, not lifecycle emails.
Yes, I think that we're starting to get somewhere now. That's really good, because what you're talking about in a prior conversation, what you did is you decided to actually move up pay scale wise instead of trying to do the scale thing. And so instead of being the Dropbox at $9.99 a month to get 100,000 users, you said, maybe what I'll do is I'll acquire customers at this threshold. Can we talk about we're going to talk what type of barriers did you set in your mind that prevented you from moving, and then how did you overcome those barriers?
The biggest thing is it's all about identity. I kept identifying myself as the next 37 Signals wannabe, and I love them, and I love everything that they write, and a lot of what they write is very relevant to building great software. But there are very few 37 Signals. There's very few Facebooks. There are very few big, huge players out there, and I don't think that as business owners, we don't. It's great to have aspirations and ambition. I'm all for that. But we don't need to be modeling ourselves after them when we are currently at a much lower stage. Our goal is to get to the next level, and then from there, get to the next level. And we don't need to be using the tools and techniques that they're playing with just because they're the latest toys. And I think that's where so many of us who are tech oriented, we're always looking for the latest toys. We grew up that way. And so the next shiny object, the next shiny marketing tactic, the next shiny marketing strategy is what we're always after. The fundamental tenet of marketing is to keep doing what works until it stops working. Because you have a repeatable process to sell, market, and bring people into your business, either as a service provider or as a product provider. Just keep doing that until you max it out. Because if you got a goose laying golden eggs because you figured out product market fit, why would you try to try to clone that spend your time working on the cloning technology of that goose. Instead, just like keep taking the eggs and keeps and making sure that you can enjoy them.
Do you think it's a form of self-sabotage, or is it just the conditioning of people reading Rework and 4 Hour Work Week and things like that?
No, I think those books are awesome, and I think that like the problem that I had, and I don't know if everyone will identify this, maybe they will. And the problem that I had is that I wanted to be like DHH. I wanted to be Jason Fried, but and maybe one day that happens. But I wanted that so badly that I was modeling what they were doing, and that wasn't getting me anywhere. I was mastering things that were applicable to companies at that size, but that doesn't help me. What helped me was, doing things that would help me succeed, help my business succeed. And once I got over that, like, it's great to have role models and great to have people who are your mentors, even though you may not directly know them. I think that's great, but you still got to do what's right for your business at your stage.
Okay, so I'm going to take a different twist for a second, and you're not expecting this one.
Okay.
You have and we're going to call it a supporter, but also probably somewhat of a instigator. Your mom. You guys are having your.
She's gonna watch this. She's gonna watch. She Googles me. I think she has a Google alert on me. So she'll be like, anything Naveen Dittakavi that comes up on the net, she clicks on, and she's like, "Hey, you were on this. Hey, you were on this." So before I even know that it's been out there. So when I was mentioned in Business Insider, she was the one who saw first that I was there. She's like, "You were in Business Insider." I'm like, "What?"
So
anyway, sorry.
You
keep going
with
the mom conversation.
You guys were driving in the car, and you come from a family very educated, and she says, "Well, do you need to go get this degree, or do you need to go get a job at this place?" And you've had this conversation of, "Here's my business, and it's doing well, and I've got this recurring revenue." Let's talk about that for a second, because that's very remarkable to have that tiger mom relationship and how you broke through that cycle.
I don't think I've broken through it. You never win. You will never win. Anyway, so here's what happened. I was on a road trip, and we were driving back from our wedding tasting. We're getting married in a couple of months, and we had a tasting down in Florida where we're getting married. And my mom and I drove down, and my fiance and her dad drove down in a different car. And I wish we drove together now. But on the way up, she was mentioning that a family friend of mine, who got married 3 years ago, her and her husband bought a $500,000 home just a couple of streets down from where we live, in the affluent part of the north suburbs of Atlanta. And I think that like my mom was like, "Oh my God, my friend's kid is like settled down, doing really well, has a $500,000 house. My son is still living in a condo, a 2-bedroom condo in Atlanta, and he doesn't own property. And like, why not?" And I think that's what happens. And I had to explain to her that's awesome that my friend did that. I'm so happy for them because they've been married for a while. They're nesting. This is where it's a great school district. And like it's the right place to be. Like that's where I grew up. And like she didn't get that like what is working for them now is not the appropriate life stage thing for me, even though we may be very similar in age. That was fundamentally like what was wrong. But the thing is, like in the moment, I wasn't able to convey that. I was kind of like, I'm making money, Mom. Like, what the hell? Like, if I could buy that if I want to do, but I'm not gonna, I used those words, was the wrong words to use, and I basically had to explain to her that like things are going okay, they're fine, don't worry about me. And I don't think it like put the conversation at ease for the moment. I don't think it's ever done. Like I said with the tiger mom, I don't think you never win. You never conclude that conversation until she has like, I don't know, X many grandkids and me in some suburban house. Like it will be like, what's the next thing? And then when are your grandkids going to Stanford? So
That's two of the last conversation pieces that we've had are, one, you decided that, hey, you know what? You're not the 37 Signals business. You run a business where you really enjoy your customers and you put them at the center of your universe. And then same with your mom of saying, look, this isn't the house that I want. This isn't the life that I want. Those are two big paradigm shifts, and those are actually really difficult for a business owner to overcome. What other type of paradigm shifts have you had to go through? Like, what was the most uncomfortable one that helped you grow?
Understanding what I really want, I think, is the most important thing that that you can take time and spend analyzing for yourself. Because if you keep running your life the way that other people think that they should run, that your life should run, whether if you're young and your parents still play a big role, like if they do what your parents say, or you do what, if you're like, for example, if you're in a startup environment like San Francisco or even like Raleigh Durham, or if you're in certain circles here in Atlanta in that startup scene, everybody's expecting you to build a highly scalable, highly exitable company. When like that's unless you want that, if you want that, awesome, good, and go and play in those circles. But people who, I think a lot of people who started a business started it for a particular reason. Now, maybe one of the reasons was to make a lot of money, and if you find the right value proposition, you can make a lot of money. But once we start a business, we start to look and see like, what should we be doing? And when we start to answer that question based on other people's insights and what other people are doing, we're doing things wrong. It's, what do I want to do with my business? Do I want to make it a business that's going to stand the test of time and be around and provide me with a fulfilling life that, if I'm still working in it and providing a fulfilling life? Or do you want to build something, grow it, and then sell it? And then, I don't know, like, is it the beach that you're looking for? Or is it like the accomplishment of having a business and being covered on TechCrunch? And what's motivating you? I think if you have to answer that question, when you answer that question, you can then start to make decisions to take yourself to the appropriate next level. Because the next level for someone who wants to grow a sustainable business is very, very different than the next level for someone who wants to rapidly scale and play in the startup world.
You mentioned something that I think if our listeners take that last piece of advice and they really focus on what it is that they want. I mean, because earlier on in your career, your goal was to stamp your passport as much as you could. And you traveled the world. You did remarkable things. I mean, you went to Germany to get a BMW. I mean,
yeah,
how many
3 times.
people do that?
I'm on my 3rd one.
There. I mean, that's not normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you had to think differently and you had to act differently. And regardless if you want to be a smaller shop or scale, you have to make those decisions. And you have to have supreme clarity.
Yeah, I agree. But, it takes time to get there. It takes time to get there. So don't beat yourself up if you are finishing this interview and you don't have immediate clarity. It takes a lot of time and a lot of introspection to really understand what you really want. But the thing is you can't just keep thinking about it. You actually have to do certain exercises, and that exercise may be to write out what your ideal day looks like 5 years from now and 10 years from now. What do you really want to be doing? What is your day like? Literally write what time you wake up in the morning, like minute, like not minute by minute, but like segment by segment of your day. What happens, and is that what you want? Like, craft it, work backwards, reverse engineer your path there. Because ideas and thoughts about strategy, that's fine to dream, but if you want to make that happen, you have to write it down and like find how do you make that 10-year dream happen, that 5-year dream happen. And that's a really important exercise to do.
That's really valuable. This has been a great interview for people that are starting a business or people that are growing a business. I mean, you've grown a business to scale to a very comfortable level for yourself. And I don't use scale in the Silicon Valley term, but I'm using scale as in you have the right people in place, you have the right processes in place, and you know what you want. And your customers absolutely love you. That's the benchmark. What other piece of advice can you share as we part in our conversation? What can you share with our listeners that will help them continue to grow their businesses?
So I would say, I think I asked you earlier in this conversation, like maybe even before we started, who are your listeners? Who is this audience? Who makes this up? What else do they listen to? Who else do they go to? And you told me that there may be some crossover with Rob Walling. There may be some crossover with Andrew Warner and Mixergy. And I know the kind of people who are doing that because I'm also listening to that. I'm also consuming that information. So I think I'm fitting in to a great degree with the vast majority of people who are aspiring to get to the next level, whatever that means for them. My recommendation is for the vast majority of these people to take a step back, do that exercise, and get very real with what they want. I wanted to be able to build significant recurring revenue so that I could work on anything that I wanted to do, whether that was to build a new product that requires enormous amounts of runway and time, whether that was to work with elite clients on particular engagements. I wanted to do whatever I wanted to do, and I was only able to do that because I built recurring revenue. So, because that pays the bills, you got to take care of yourself before you can make your dreams happen. So, I would recommend that people do that exercise, write a 5-year path and a 10-year path of what they would like their life to look like, and then make certain decisions to get there. So that could be building up their recurring revenue stream if they're a consultancy. That could be, they want to exit their current business. What does that mean? What does their life look like? And then how do you take a step-by-step a direction there? Don't look at what you have to do in year 5. Look at what you have to do in years 1, 2, and 3, and then start taking deliberate steps towards that direction.
Very actionable. One last question, and this is self-serving for me. When I write through my big goals or my big visions, I have a challenge of chunking down, of figuring out that next step. Sometimes it's too big of a picture, and it's hard for me to find the smaller picture. What can you share to me and our listeners that take the time to write down the 5-year and 10-year, but they're struggling to find the smallest next step? What can you share?
Okay, I'll tell you right now. I can tell you what I'm doing because I can't give you a hypothetical for you or a listener because I'm not on a live call with them. I do a lot of live calls and I give people a lot of live, direct, actionable feedback. But in this case, I can only tell you what I'm doing with something. So I'm putting this course together to show consultancies, software consultancies, how to build non-time-based recurring revenue, meaning that you don't have to actually do work like a retainer model to build recurring revenue. So it's a lot of work to put this course together, and it's an enormous task. So how do you actually take steps to get that end result of this course to be put together? So you chunk it out in terms of okay, we need to do content development. And then that's massive. That's the entire part of the course. And you have outreach and sales and marketing and stuff like that. So let's talk about content development, which is where I'm not at right now. So when I take content development, I then break it out into a few things. So in a few weeks, I'm going up to St. Louis to teach a Rails company how to build recurring revenue. And I am preparing my presentation. And that presentation has a starting point, the introduction. So how do I then compose the introduction. What am I looking for? So what did I do? I went to a presentation that I really admire, which is Ramit on Creative Live, because he was talking to a very similar audience, an audience that didn't really know him very well, and who was interested in hearing what he had to say. And so he had to find a way to introduce himself, introduce the concept of, earning more or mastering your finances or finding your dream job over a course of certain days. So he had to relate to that audience, start from scratch where they didn't know anything about him, and then build that relationship through the presentation, and then start to guide the audience through the course material. So I was like, this is a really great way to model my course. So then what were the steps involved? I have a copy of that Creative Live course. I took the first 45 minutes, which is the introduction portion of it, and I had my transcriptionist transcribe it. Then I started to look at the patterns at the introduction. What's he doing? Why is he doing that? And then what do I need to do in my introduction to build that relationship with an audience that doesn't know me? And that's kind of like how I took deliberate steps. Start content development, introduction. What do I need to do in the introduction? I need to understand what is a successful introduction, and then how do I model that, and how do I write my own content in that correct model. So that's an example of breaking things down to an actionable level so that you can start moving towards those either year goals or short-term goals.
That's a great example. Very actionable.
Thanks.
I think our listeners, I want them to be able to follow up and say thank you to you, and what's the best way for them to do that and to be able to learn more about you?
So I do some writing, and I do have an email list available at dittakavi.com, which is my last name, which is DITTAKAV as in Victor I.com. And that's where you can learn a little more about me and see my trailer with my interview with Ramit, and kind of get to know a little bit more about what I talk about, and which is, I try to be really practical because I'm tired of being a dreamer. I was tired of being a dreamer who didn't really get anywhere, and I found that being super practical and pragmatic led to significant revenue, both recurring and one time, and that's just what I was interested in.
Okay. So everyone go to dittakavi.com. We'll put a link on the screen and inside the podcast. And nothing but top, trustworthy, valuable information that you've put out consistently. So I can't recommend it any higher. It's great. And last is our 48-hour challenge. So I'm going to surprise you with the 48-hour challenge. What would you say to our listeners that they should do or could do in the next 48 hours?
The next 48 hours, I think you could ask yourself that question. I think you could do this exercise. It doesn't take that long. Ask yourself that question. Don't ask yourself 10 years. 10 years is actually really hard to think about. Where do you want to be in 10 years? Ask yourself, where do you want to be in 5 years? What does that look like? What does your day look like when you wake up on a Monday or a Tuesday? And what does that look like? For me, I had to do this, and I had to be very considerate about my life changes that are happening. I'm getting married in 2 months. So I was like, 5 years from now, if we're fortunate, probably have a couple of kids. So what does my day with my family look like? How does my work fit around my day? And then how do I then shift my business so that I can still add value and be productive and help people in terms of my clients, while also having the time of my life with my future family.
Excellent. That's a great 48-hour challenge.
Great.
Thank you so much. It's been a great interview today. I want everyone to give a shout out to you and follow up, get more information about what you're doing, and to connect with you at your website, dittakavi.com.
Thank you so much for having me, Spencer. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.